So the Missa Solemnis is a choral orchestral work written in the 1820s around the same time Beethoven was writing the Ninth Symphony. Now we all know how famous the Ninth Symphony became, but in people in my musical circles, as a student and as a professional, we've always looked to the Missa Solemnis as, well, the pinnacle of his career. So even though the Ninth Symphony gets all the best press, it really is the Missa Solemnis that displays the genius of Beethoven at his greatest. Now, Missa Solemnis means solemn mass, and when his predecessors like Mozart or Haydn would write a mass, it was with the intent that it would actually be used inside the liturgy as part of a Sunday service. The Missa Solemnis is such a large canvas work that it was intended for the concert hall, and it is a profound statement of Beethoven's faith. And it wasn't intended for an actual church service. And because of this large-scale composition, Beethoven is able to use this form and expand it in a way that few composers before him ever did. But clearly towards the end of Beethoven's career, he was writing works of larger and larger scale. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is well over an hour in length, and that was unheard of until he came along. Similarly with the Mass form, when you're writing for the liturgy, you can create works of much larger scope and scale. This was unheard of until Beethoven came around, with possibly the exception of one other liturgical work, the B minor Mass by Johann Sebastian Bach. So when you're talking about Beethoven's predecessors like Haydn and Mozart, you're talking about orchestras and ensembles of relatively modest size. And certainly with Beethoven, all of a sudden the symphonic form gets larger. The forces become larger, partly due to his deafness. Add more choir, add more instruments, trombones, things that we take for granted today as part of the symphony orchestra. Beethoven was the first to employ this on a regular basis to increase the scale and the volume of the symphony and of all this music. With the scale of the Industrial Revolution and the improvements of instruments, this very much is laying the groundwork for composers that were to come some 75 years later, like Mahler, who took it to the largest degree when you had 300 people on stage. So this is a bucket list piece of mine. It's a rarity to hear it performed for a variety of reasons. But a lot of scholars, musicians, music enthusiasts look at this piece as the greatest example of late Beethoven. Now, what makes late Beethoven so difficult, whether you're talking about the string quartets or the piano sonatas or the symphonies, is that as Beethoven's hearing was diminishing and he was losing his connection to the outside world, he turned inward to his imagination and ironically found greater opportunity and potential for his compositions in his compositional process. And what he ends up doing is he takes elements that normally wouldn't work well together, juxtaposes extreme dynamics or extreme changes in tempo or searching harmonies that are unheard of at the time. And because of these extreme fluctuations in material that are juxtaposed side by side with each other, for someone who's interpreting it and performing it, the performer has to make these disparate elements sound fused and organic. Now, one of the reasons why the Beethoven Missa Solemnis is rarely performed is that it's incredibly difficult, especially for the chorus. That's why I'm so glad that Tim McMillan and the combined choruses from Simpson College plus the Des Moines Vocal Arts Ensemble. You need people of incredible skill and stamina to play and to sing this music. For example, Beethoven was not a singer. Mozart was, Haydn was, they all had to write operas and masses and the like. This was new territory for Beethoven. And so as a result, his vocal writing tends to be quite awkward. A lot of the singers have to sing in extremely high ranges very loudly for a very long time, or then they have to leap down to the other end of the spectrum of their voice. Well, the voice is a piece of tissue that has to stretch. If you're playing the violin and you have to make big leaps, you just have to cross a string, whereas in a wind instrumentalist, you have to just change the fingering. Not so much with the voice. So as a result, The vocal writing is very instrumental, and it leaps around a lot. And add to this the rapid changes in material and the novel explorations of harmony. You have to have an incredible ear and an incredible voice with incredible stamina to perform this. And that's why it's not performed very often, which is unfortunate, because if it were performed more often, I am convinced this would be much more readily accessible and recognized as Beethoven's finest hour. Ironically, in many ways, Beethoven's deafness did free him and made him grow as an artist, but it didn't come easily, of course. He had a great crisis in his career in the early 1800s when he realized that his deafness was irretrievable. He could no longer be a concert pianist. And let's face it, when you're a musician and your entire career is around sound and you're losing your hearing, I'm sure he thought that his career was over, and in fact he contemplated suicide in the early 1800s. But he came to grips with that, and I think he found that that burden of losing his hearing was actually the key for him growing as an artist. And in fact, by the time you get to his later works, there's this incredible heartfelt joy in his music that I think was missing throughout most of his life. The Ode to Joy of Beethoven's Ninth. And the Missa Solemnis is but another iteration of his profound gratitude and his faith and his joy that he was able to find.